The camping trip was supposed to be like any other, just two best friends, a tent, an endless wilderness. But crammed together in that too small tent, with only the sound of our breathing and the night pressing in around us, something shifted. A touch that lingered too long. A glance that meant too much. A line we never thought we'd cross. By the time the sun rose, nothing between us would ever be the same. It all started at the height of summer. The heat was relentless, so Liam and I escaped into the woods, looking for relief under the trees. We had thrown a tent into the back of the truck without checking it. A stupid, too small tent, definitely not made for two grown men. We stood there staring at it, the place we'd have to call our bedroom for the next few nights. This was supposed to be just another camping trip. Just Liam and me, like always. Since we were kids. But something about this trip felt different. Something I couldn't name. Something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. "Dude, tell me you brought the bigger one," Liam groaned, tugging at the flimsy fabric. His dark eyes flicked between me and the sad excuse for a shelter. I ran a hand through my hair, already regretting every decision that had led to this moment. I thought I did, I admitted, my face burning. I just grabbed the first one in the garage. Liam sighed, lips pressed into a tight line, then his expression softened. That familiar smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Well, guess we're getting real comfortable tonight." And there it was again. That tension. Subtle. Barely there. But I felt it, like static under my skin. I forced a laugh, pretending my heart hadn't just skipped a beat. "Yeah. Looks like it." We spent the afternoon setting up camp, collecting firewood, going through the usual routine. But no matter how much I tried to ignore it, that undercurrent didn't go away. Liam had always been touchy. The kind of guy who'd throw an arm around me or shove my shoulder when I said something dumb. But this time, every brush of his skin felt electric. Like a spark waiting to catch. By the time the sun sank below the trees and the fire crackled between us, I had nearly convinced myself I was imagining it. That Liam was just Liam, my best friend, and I was an idiot for reading too much into it. "So, you gonna tell me what's going on with you?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. I blinked, my fingers tightening around the stick I'd been poking the fire with. "What do you mean?" Liam tilted his head, studying me in that way he always did when he saw right through me. "You've been acting weird all day." I swallowed hard, scrambling for something, an excuse, a lie, anything to make him drop it. But before I could answer, he smirked. "Wait, don't tell me, you're scared of sleeping in that tiny-ass tent with me, aren't you?" I scoffed, rolling my eyes. "Oh yeah." "Terrified," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He laughed, but there was something else in his eyes now. Teasing. Knowing. He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees, gaze locked on mine. "It's not gonna fit us, you know." His voice was quieter now, like he was testing something. I should have laughed it off. Should have shoved him like always. Should have joked about how we'd slept in worse. But I didn't. I just stared at him, heart thudding against my ribs, my thoughts spiraling. He noticed, of course he did. He always did. But instead of calling me out or making fun of me, his smirk faltered. His tongue darted out to wet his lips. And suddenly the air between us wasn't just tense, it was thick. Unbearable. I looked away first, forcing a chuckle, trying to shove normalcy back into the space between us. "We'll make it work," I said, standing and stretching, pretending like my entire body hadn't just caught fire. Liam watched me a moment longer before nodding. "Yeah," he murmured, unreadable. "We will." But the night wasn't over. It dragged on, the fire flickering and casting shadows across the trees. The warmth from the flames didn't reach me the way Liam's presence did. It never had. Not like this. Still, I told myself I was imagining it. That it was just the way night made everything feel closer, heavier, riskier. Liam stretched, arms above his head, hoodie riding up as he tugged it off. Now only a thin t-shirt hugged his skin. I shouldn't have noticed. I shouldn't have stared. But I did. And he caught me. He didn't say anything at first. Just gave me this look, one eyebrow raised, something playful in his expression. "You sure you're okay?" he asked, voice edged with amusement. Like he knew something I didn't. I cleared my throat, eyes back on the fire. "I'm fine. Just tired." Liam hummed like he didn't believe me. "Then let's call it a night." He stood, stretched again, and for a second his shirt lifted just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. Then his arms dropped. We got to figure out how to survive that tense situation anyway. I swallowed hard and nodded, even though every part of me screamed to stay in the open air, where there was space. Where I wouldn't be trapped so close to him in a tent that suddenly felt too small in more ways than one. But I didn't have a choice. The tent was even worse than I imagined. I stared at it, dreading the moment I'd have to climb in. Dreading what it would feel like to be pressed up against Liam, with no distractions. No escape. Liam just laughed. "This is ridiculous," he said, tossing his sleeping bag inside. Then he turned to me. "You sure you don't want to just sleep outside? I'll take the ground. Let you have the whole tent to yourself." And maybe I should have said yes. Maybe I should have let him stretch out under the stars while I got the space I desperately needed. But that wasn't what best friends did, right? Best friends didn't let the other freeze just because they were having some kind of crisis over feelings they weren't supposed to have. So I forced a smirk and shook my head. "Nope. We're both suffering in there together." Liam grinned, and it wasn't fair how easy everything always seemed for him. "All right," he said, "but if you kick me in your sleep, I'm pushing you out." I rolled my eyes. Yeah. I climbed in first, unrolling my sleeping bag and trying to wiggle into it as best I could in the cramped space. There was barely room for me, let alone for Liam too. But he followed in right after, his body brushing against mine as he zipped himself in. The whole tent seemed to shift, suddenly smaller, tighter. The air thick. Hard to ignore. Liam exhaled, his breath fanning against the back of my neck. "Yeah, this is way worse than I thought." I chuckled, trying to keep my voice light. "Told you." For a while, we just laid there, listening to the night. Leaves rustling. An owl hooting in the distance. But beneath that, there was something else. A silence heavy with tension. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, or if Liam was lying there, feeling the exact same thing. Then he shifted. Just a small movement, but enough. His arm brushed mine, warmth seeping through the thin layers between us. I felt it, the way his breathing changed. The way his muscles tensed for a second before he let out a soft laugh, just above a whisper. "Dude, this is so cramped." I swallowed, nodding even though he couldn't see me in the dark. "Yeah." A beat passed. Then, before I could stop myself, the word slipped out. "You can, take off your sleeping bag if it's too hot." The second I said it, I regretted it. What was I even thinking? But Liam didn't hesitate. I heard the soft rustle of fabric, the slow sound of his zipper, the quiet shift of his body. "Yeah, good call," he murmured, his voice lower now. "Closer." I should have done the same. Should have rolled away. Put space between us. Should have done anything but what I did. But I didn't move. I just lay there, breath shallow, body stiff, certain he could feel the tension radiating off me. Then, so softly I almost missed it, he whispered, "Why are you so tense?" I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. My pulse roared in my ears. I'm not. Liam didn't buy it. Of course he didn't. "Come on, Mike," he said, voice softer now, gentle, coaxing. "You've been acting weird since we got here." I hesitated, throat tight, fingers clenched around the edge of my sleeping bag. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to admit something I wasn't even sure was real. But then, Liam did something unexpected. He reached out. His fingers brushed against my wrist, just barely. The lightest touch. But it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. "Hey," he said again, even softer. "Talk to me." I swallowed, trying to find words, any words that weren't the truth. But then I turned my head just slightly, just enough to look at him. And in the dark, I saw it. The way his gaze lingered on my face. The way his lips parted, just slightly. The way his fingers stayed where they were, resting against my skin like they belonged there. And suddenly, I wasn't so sure I'd been imagining things after all. The night still stretched on, but the space between us seemed to shrink with every breath. I should have moved. Should have rolled over. Created some distance, before this turned into something we weren't ready for. But I didn't. Liam's fingers were still there, light against my wrist, like he was waiting. Waiting for something. Waiting for me. My throat was dry. My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. The forest had gone still. The fire outside was nothing more than glowing embers. And inside the tent, all that remained was our breathing. And this unbearable tension between us. Then, Liam did something I didn't expect. He didn't pull away. His fingers moved. Just slightly. Tracing the inside of my wrist. His touch was feather-light, but it sent a shock straight through me. I felt my pulse stutter under his fingertips. And I knew he could feel it too. "Liam," I whispered. Though I wasn't even sure what I meant to say. He didn't speak right away. Just exhaled softly, his breath warm on my skin. Then, so quietly I almost thought I imagined it, he said, "This doesn't feel weird to you." I blinked, my whole body tense. I turned my head toward him, barely able to make out his face in the dim light filtering through the tent. His eyes were on me, steady. Searching. Waiting. He looked unsure. Hesitant. Like he needed me to say it first. Like he couldn't risk saying it aloud unless I did. My throat tightened. But I couldn't finish the sentence. Because I didn't know how. Didn't know how to say that nothing about this felt weird. That it felt right. So right, it scared the hell out of me. Because Liam wasn't supposed to look at me like that. Wasn't supposed to touch me like that. Wasn't supposed to feel like this. Because Liam was straight. At least, that's what he'd always said. That's what I'd always believed. He had dated girls before. I remembered Sophie, his ex from last year. He'd seemed sure about her. Sure about what he wanted. They'd lasted almost 2 years before it ended. And even then, he hadn't seemed heartbroken. Just ready to move on. And for the longest time, I thought that meant I had no chance. That he would never see me as anything more than his best friend. But now I wasn't so sure. Liam swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "You can tell me if it does," he said after a moment, voice quiet. "Careful. If you want me to stop, just say so." I don't know what came over me. What part of me moved before I could stop it? But before he could even finish that sentence, I reached for him. It was instinct. And a mistake. And everything I'd been holding back, crashing into. The space between us collapsed all at once. I grabbed his wrist before he could pull away, my fingers curling around his skin. Not tight. Not forceful. Just enough. Enough to tell him I didn't want him to stop. That I couldn't let him stop. Not now. Not after spending so long pretending I didn't want this. Liam inhaled sharply, his whole body going still. I felt his pulse jump beneath my fingers, felt the way his breathing caught, the way his fingers twitched against my skin. We didn't move. Didn't speak. The space between us was barely a breath. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something I couldn't come back from. Liam, I whispered again, just a breath, barely a sound. A plea. And that was all it took. Something shifted. Liam moved before I could even process it, turning toward me. His hand slid from my wrist to my palm, his fingers slipping between mine like they'd always belonged there. And then, God, he was closer. So much closer. I barely had time to react before his forehead pressed against mine, his breath fanning across my lips, the heat of him, his presence, pressing into every part of me. Like he couldn't bear to leave a single inch between us. I was shaking. I didn't know if he could feel it, but I was. Every inch of me was on fire, burning with something too big to name. Something I had tried so hard to bury. But now it was too late. Liam's fingers tightened around mine. Tell me to stop, he whispered, voice rough and low. Desperate. I couldn't. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I leaned my forehead into his, a little harder. I let my lips part, just slightly. I let myself lean in. Liam's breath hitched. His fingers clenched. And I felt it. That moment. The exact second everything changed. No more pretending. No more hiding. No more pushing this down, hoping it would just fade away. And then, he kissed me. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't anything like I'd imagined our first kiss would be. It was slow. Careful. Like he wasn't sure if this was real. Like he was afraid that if he moved too fast, I'd vanish. I wasn't going anywhere. I let my fingers slip from his and rest against his wrist, holding just tight enough to anchor myself. Just tight enough to say, I'm here. Liam made a sound against my lips, quiet, almost broken. And something inside me snapped. I kissed him back. I melted into him. Forgot where we were. Forgot everything except how he felt. How he tasted. How his hand slid into my hair, how the other gripped my waist like he needed something, someone, to hold on to. And God, I needed him to hold on to me. The kiss deepened. Still unsure. Still new. But so right. My hands moved without thought, gripping the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer, drawing him in like I couldn't get enough. Liam gasped into my mouth, his fingers trembling against my skin. But he didn't stop. He didn't pull away. He pulled me in. And for the first time in my life, I let him. I let myself want. I let myself have. I let myself fall. The world outside the tent vanished. It was just us. Tangled up in something too big to name, too overwhelming to define. Too much. But in the best way. In the only way that mattered. Maybe I should have been scared. Should have thought about what it meant. What might come next. What this would do to us. But I didn't. Because with Liam's lips on mine, his fingers in my hair, his body pressed so close. Nothing had ever felt more right. His grip on my waist tightened like he was grounding himself. Like he was testing whether we were real. Maybe that's what this was. A test. A moment where we waited for the other to pull away. To laugh it off. To pretend it was nothing, just some heat of the moment mistake. But neither of us moved. Neither of us let go. Instead, Liam pressed even closer. His forehead rested against mine. His breath was warm, shaky, uneven. And in the dim glow of the tent, I could just make out his lips, parted slightly. Like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. And then, barely above a whisper, he spoke. I don't know what this means, he said, voice rough, hesitant. But I don't. I don't want to stop. Neither did I. I should have said something. Should have confirmed it. Should have told him I felt the same way. But words felt useless. They weren't enough to explain what was happening between us. What had always been happening. So instead, I kissed him again. And this time, he didn't hold back. His hand slid up my side, gripping the fabric of my shirt like he needed something to keep him steady. And I needed him too. My hands found his shoulders, then his neck, threading into his hair as I pulled him closer. Deepening the kiss. Letting go of all the fear that had held me still for so long. No more hesitating. No more hiding. Just the sound of his breath. The way his body molded into mine. The way our lips moved like they'd been meant to all along. And somewhere, far in the back of my mind, I knew this was risky. Knew there was no going back. But I didn't care. Not when his hands were on me. Not when he was kissing me like he'd been waiting just as long to cross this line. Then, suddenly, he pulled back. His breathing ragged, eyes dark and searching. "This is insane," he muttered, shaking his head. But his fingers stayed tangled in my shirt. I swallowed hard, my chest rising and falling as fast as his. "Yeah," I breathed. His lips twitched, like he wanted to smirk but couldn't. He didn't quite manage a smile. But he didn't regret it. Neither did I. His hand came up slowly, brushing my cheekbone with his thumb, so gentle it almost undid me. He was looking at me differently now. Like he was seeing me for the first time. Like something had clicked into place in his mind, something he hadn't understood until this moment. I wanted to ask him what he was thinking, wanted to know what was running through his head as he stared at me like that. But before I could say anything, he spoke. "What do we do now?" The question lingered between us. Heavy. And neither of us had an answer. This wasn't something we'd ever prepared for. Wasn't something we'd talked about. It had just happened. And now we were here, breathless, tangled together in a space too small for everything we were feeling. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe. "I don't know." Liam let out a sharp exhale, running a hand through his hair. His fingers were shaking slightly. And for the first time since this started, I saw it. The uncertainty in his eyes. The way his shoulders had tensed. The way his walls were creeping back up. And maybe that was what scared me the most. The idea that this moment, this perfect, impossible moment, might slip away before either of us could figure out what it meant. So before he could pull back completely, before he could second-guess all of it, I reached for his wrist again. Held him there. "Liam," I said. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. I hesitated, just for a second. "Don't overthink it." His lips parted. For a second, I thought he might argue. Might pull away and call it a mistake. But instead, something shifted. His shoulders eased. His grip on my waist tightened instead of letting go. And then, without a word, he leaned in again. His mouth brushing mine in a way that felt different this time. More certain. More real. I still didn't know what this was. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew I didn't want it to stop. And neither did he. The rest of the night passed in a blur. We didn't talk about it. We didn't try to define it. We just existed. Pressed close in that small tent, hands brushing in places they hadn't before, breaths mingling in the narrow space between us. We didn't push it further. Neither of us needed to. It was enough just to know it was real. Enough to not pretend anymore. And for a while, that was enough. But when morning came, reality settled in. Like a weight on my chest. Because whatever happened last night, whatever this was, wasn't something we could just ignore. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the campsite. And I knew we couldn't avoid it forever. Liam was still asleep beside me. His breathing slow and steady, his body warm against mine. I could have stayed like that forever. Could have gotten lost in the way his fingers had slipped beneath my shirt during the night. How his legs were still tangled with mine. But eventually, he stirred. He let out a low groan as he stretched, blinking against the morning light. And then, slowly, his eyes landed on mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. Then Liam let out a soft breath and rubbed the back of his neck. So, last night happened. I laughed quietly, though my heart was racing. Yeah. It did. He looked at me, gaze unreadable. You okay? I hesitated. Just for a beat. Then nodded. Are you? Another pause. Then, slowly, a smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Small. Barely there. But real. I think so. Relief washed over me so fast I almost laughed. But there was still something lingering, something heavier, unsaid. What does this mean? I asked, the words out before I could stop them. Liam's smirk faded slightly. His expression grew more serious. I don't know, he admitted. But I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. I swallowed hard and nodded. Me neither. For a long moment, we just sat there. The weight of the night before still thick between us. But we didn't pull away. We didn't take it back. And maybe, for now, that was enough. The fire had burned out long ago, only a faint wisp of smoke curling into the sky. The forest stirred around us, birds calling through the trees, leaves rustling in the breeze, the occasional crack of a branch in the distance. But none of it mattered. Liam was still looking at me. He shifted beside me, stretching his arms overhead before rubbing a hand down his face. Then, with a half sigh, he said it again. So, Pa, what now? I let out a slow breath. I don't know. I didn't know what this meant. What last night had done to us. What we were supposed to do now that we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. Liam studied me for a second, his lips pressing together before he nodded. Like he'd expected that answer. Well, do you want to talk about it more? Did I? I wasn't sure. But before I could even think of a response, he smirked again. Or, do you want to pretend we're still just two dumbass on a camping trip, and I didn't spend half the night trying to stop myself from kissing you again? My breath caught in my throat. He was joking. Kind of. But there was something else behind it, something real. I swallowed hard, pulse thudding in my ears. I hesitated. You wanted to. Liam's smirk faltered. Something softer crept into his expression. You didn't. I could have lied. Could have laughed it off. Could have shoved it away like it was nothing. But I couldn't. Not anymore. So I shook my head. I did. Silence fell between us. But not the kind that felt uncertain. The kind that felt like maybe we had finally stopped running. Liam exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. Then he looked at me again. More serious now. Listen, man, he said, voice low. I don't know what this means either. I just know that when we got here, I kept catching myself looking at you too long. And when you look back. He let out a breath, shaking his head. You look back like you were thinking the same thing. And I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that there was no way. But then last night happened. And I was holding my breath the entire time. And now. His voice dropped to a whisper. Now I can't stop thinking about it. Neither could I. The words were stuck in my throat, but I had to say them. I had to. Liam. He looked at me, something raw flickering behind his eyes. I licked my lips, forcing myself to push past the fear, the doubt, the what-ifs crowding my mind. Do you regret it? His gaze didn't waver. No. That single word hit me so hard I almost forgot how to breathe. Do you? He asked, quiet but steady. I shook my head. No. Something in him eased, like he'd been bracing for something worse. He exhaled hard, glancing away for a second before looking back at me. Then, what are we doing? I didn't have an answer. God, I wanted one. But everything still felt unsteady. The only thing I knew for certain was that I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to pretend. And I sure as hell didn't want to lose him. Before I realized what I was doing, I reached for his hand, fingers brushing his wrist, testing the space between us. Waiting for him to pull away. He didn't. He never did. Instead, he let out a shaky breath and wrapped his fingers around mine. Firm. Steady. Reassuring. Liam swallowed. His voice dropped. I don't want this to be a one-time thing. Neither did I. I met his eyes, chest tight, heart thudding like a war drum. Then, let's not let it be. His lips parted like he hadn't expected to hear me say it. Then, slowly, the smirk I knew too well, the one that always drove me a little crazy, crept back onto his face. You sure? He asked, teasing, but his voice was hoarse, like something deeper was caught behind it. I didn't hesitate. Yeah. The air shifted again. Heavier now, but not with fear. With something real. Liam let out a quiet, breathy chuckle, rubbing his thumb over the back of my hand. Well, damn. I laughed, shaking my head. What? He shrugged. Guess I gotta make this official, then. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. And then he moved. Quick. Certain. His hand came up, gripped my jaw. And then his lips were on mine. There was nothing soft about it this time. It wasn't hesitant or careful. It was hungry. Desperate. Like he'd been holding this back for way too long. And now that the dam had broken, there was no going back. And God, I didn't want him to stop. I grabbed his shirt and pulled him closer. Feeling the wild rhythm of his heartbeat slamming against mine. His body pressed into mine like we'd always been meant for this, like we'd just been too blind to see it. He kissed me like he was trying to say everything he couldn't put into words. Like he wanted me to know this wasn't a mistake. That he meant it. That he wanted me. And I kissed him back just as hard. Because I needed him to know the same. We weren't the same people we were when we got here. Somehow, in the mess of it all, we had become something new. Something we both wanted. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, Liam let out a shaky laugh. Holy! I grinned, still trying to catch my breath. Yeah. He shook his head, running a hand through his hair. So, we're doing this. I didn't hesitate. Yeah. And for the first time since this trip began, I felt weightless. Like I wasn't fighting myself anymore. Like I had finally stopped running. Liam grinned, nudging my shoulder with his. Well, you're screwed now. You're stuck with me. I smirked. I think I can handle it. He laughed, shaking his head. Damn right you can. And just like that. Everything that had once felt terrifying now felt easy. Not because it wasn't scary. But because it was us. This wasn't just some heat-of-the-moment thing. It wasn't some accident. It was real. And we weren't going back. Because in that moment, watching the way Liam looked at me like he couldn't unsee what had happened, I knew. He was never going to look at girls the same way again. Not after this. Not after me. And I wasn't going anywhere.